Yet another interesting session from the Diary of Anne Frank, Class 10, English, CBSE, retold by Sharon J. This lesson is an excerpt from Diary of a Young Girl or the Diary of Anne Frank. It is an autobiography that was first published in 1947. In this, Anne expresses her thoughts in a diary which was gifted to her on her 13th birthday. She names the diary Kitty, which she considers as her only true friend. She mentions about her childhood, her family, and a lot of other things that she told no one else. Writing in a diary is really a strange experience for someone like me. Not only because I've never written anything before, but also because it seems to me that later on, neither I nor anyone else will be interested in the musings of a 13-year-old schoolgirl. Oh well, it doesn't matter. I feel like writing, and I have an even greater need to get all kinds of things off my chest. Musings, a period of reflection or thought. Anne feels that it is strange and unusual for her to write in a diary about her feelings and experiences because it was the first time she was doing it. But then she puts these thoughts away and decides that she should write it if she feels like doing so. She feels the need to write because there were a lot of thoughts she had been holding on to lately and she needed to get them off her mind. It is known that writing one's thoughts acts as therapy. She makes the decision of writing a diary. Paper has more patience than people. I thought of this saying on one of those days when I was feeling a little depressed and was sitting at home with my chin in my hand, bored and listless, wondering whether to stay in or go out. I finally stayed where I was, brooding. Yes, paper does have more patience, and since I'm not planning to let anyone else read the stiff backed notebook grandly referred to as a diary, unless I should ever find a real friend, it probably won't make a bit of difference. Now I'm back to the point that prompted me to keep a diary in the first place. I don't have a friend. Listless, with no energy or interest, brooding, engaged in or showing deep thought about something that makes one sad, angry, or worried, prompted, provoke. The author feels that paper has much more capacity to absorb thoughts than people. People have low patience level, but a piece of paper, being a non-living thing, would not refuse from absorbing her thoughts. This realization came to her one day when she was feeling more sad and confused than usual. She could not even decide whether to go out or stay at home at that time. When she finally decided to stay at home, she sat being depressed and in deep thought. Again, she thought that paper had more patience and she decided to write everything that came in her mind because she did not intend on making someone read it unless she found a real friend. By real friend, she meant a friend with whom she could share all her secrets. The author then comes back to the point where she thought of beginning to write. It is because she is lonely and has no friend to talk to. Let me put it more clearly. Since no one will believe that a 13-year-old girl is completely alone in the world, and I'm not. I have loving parents and a 16-year-old sister, and there are about 30 people I can call friends. I have a family, a lovely aunts, and a good home. No, on the surface, I seem to have everything except my one true friend. All I think about when I'm with friends is having a good time. I can't bring myself to talk about anything but ordinary, everyday things. We don't seem to be able to get any closer, and that's the problem. Maybe it's my fault that we don't confide in each other. In any case, that's just how things are. And unfortunately, they're not liable to change. That is why I've started the diary. Confide, to tell personal things privately to a person. Liable, likely. So Anne then goes on explaining why she feels to a need for a friend, and she also feels to believe that a young girl like her is so alone, which practically is not, because she has a loving family and also about 30 people that can be called friends, loving arts, and a good place to stay. This depicts a clear picture of a happy family, but the one thing that lacks in her life is the presence of a true friend with whom she can share everything. She doesn't have a good time with friends. They talk about all stuff but not real stuff that is actually going on in their lives. Despite trying hard, they are unable to get closer. She feels that maybe it is her who is not able to trust anyone with the private stuff, that she is not able to come any close to her friends. She feels that the current situation cannot be changed, and thus she needs to write her feelings in the diary. The image of this long awaited friend in my imagination. I don't want to jot down the facts in this diary the way most people would do. But I want the diary to be my friend. I'm going to call this friend Kitty, since no one would understand a word of my stories. To Kitty, if I were to plunge right in, I'd better provide a brief sketch of my life, as much as I dislike doing so. Enhance, intensify, or increase, plunge, jump, or dive quickly. Usually, when someone is writing a diary, they list down all the facts about them in a formal manner. But the author does not wish to do. Hoping that someone would read her diary one day, she thinks that writing without giving details about the background story would be ineffective. So, despite not wanting to do so, she gives brief detail about her life. My father, the most adorable father I've ever seen, didn't marry my mother until he was 36 and she was 25. My sister Margaret was born in Frankfurt in Germany in 1926. I was born on 12th of June 1929. I lived in Frankfurt until I was 4. My father emigrated to Holland in 1933. My mother, Edith Hollander Frank, went with him to Holland in September, while Margot and I were sent to Asian to stay with our grandmother. Margot went to Holland in December, and I followed in February when I was plunked down on the table as a birthday present for Margot. Adorable, lovable, cute. Emigrated. Leave one's own country in order to settle permanently in another. Plunked, to put down. So here the author refers to her father, who is the most lovable father one could get. And he married her mother when he was at the age of 36 and she was only 25. Both Anne and her sister Margaret were both born in Frankfurt. As soon as Anne turned 4, her father moved to Holland, followed by a mother in September, while both the sisters stayed with their grandmother. Margaret was also sent to Holland in December, followed by Anne in February, who was brought as a birthday present for Margot. I started right away at the Montessori Nursery School. I stayed there until I was 6, at which time I started in the first form. In the sixth form, my teacher was Mrs. Cooperus, the headmistress. At the end of the year, we were both in tears as we said a heartbreaking farewell. In the summer of 1941, Grandma fell ill and had to have an operation, so my making someone's departure. So in Holland, Anne was sent to a Montessori nursery school. She started from the first form, and she had Mrs. Cooperus, the headmistress, as her teacher in sixth form, who even cried at the time of farewell. In 1941, Anne's birthday could not be celebrated well because her grandmother fell ill and she had to undergo an operation. Grandma died in January 1942. No one knows how often I think of her and still love her. This birthday celebration 1942 was intended to make up for the other, and Grandma's candle was lit along with the rest. The four of us are still doing well, and that brings me to the present date of 20 June 1942 and the solemn dedication of my diary. Intended, planned, solemn, characterized by deep sincerity, dedication, commitment. Unfortunately, her grandmother left them in January 1942 and misses her grandmother more than anyone knows. This year's birthday was to be celebrated with great zeal so as to compensate for last year's. She then mentions that her family is doing well, which sums up her background and brings her to the present date of June 20, 1942, when she is writing her diary. 42. Dearest Kitty, our entire class is quacking in its boots. The reason, of course, is the forthcoming meeting in which the teachers decide who will move up to the next form and who will be kept back. Half the class is making bets. Gian and I laugh ourselves silly at the two boys behind us, Cian and Jacques, who have staked their entire holiday savings on their bet. From morning to night, it's you're going to pass? No, I'm not. Yes, you are. No, I'm not. Even G's pleading glances and my angry outbursts can't calm them down. If you ask me, there are so many dummies that about a quarter of the class should be kept back. But teachers are the most unpredictable creatures on earth. Quaking, shake or tremble, staked, bet, chanced, pleading to make an emotional appeal, glances, take a brief of hurried look, outburst, a sudden release of strong emotion, dummies, an object designed to resemble and serve as a substitute for the real or usual one, unpredictable, not able to be predicted or changeable. So Anne says she started writing her diary on the 20th of June 1942 and it was addressed to her friend Kitty. She mentions how her entire class is nervous about their result and she says it's unpredictable and will be decided by a meeting of teachers in which they will select the students to be moved to the next class or kept back. Many students were making bets. Some had put in their entire summer savings at stake. She and her friend G also made fun of the nervous boys who were sitting behind them and they kept on saying to each other that I'm not going to pass, while others would console them and say yes you would. G was polite as she tried to stop them from making noise while Anne scolded them, but none of it worked. According to Anne, about a quarter of the class should not be allowed to pass because they hardly respond or take part in any of the school activities. I'm not so worried about my girlfriends and myself. We'll make it. The only subject I'm not sure about is maths. Anyway, all we can do is wait. Until then, we keep telling each other not to lose hope. Not to lose heart means not to be discouraged. Author says that she is not bothered about her friends because she is sure that they will pass. The only something that she is unsure about is mathematics. She seems to be having a tough time with the subject, but all they could do was wait for the result and not lose their hope. I get along pretty well with all my teachers. There are 9 of them, 7 men and 2 women. Mr. Keesing, the old fogey, who teaches maths, was annoyed with me for ages because I talked so much. After several warnings, he assigned me extra homework, an essay on the subject, a chatterbox. A chatterbox? What can you write about that? I'd worry about that later, I decided. I jotted down the title in my notebook, tucked it in my bag, and tried to keep quiet. Old forgave means an old fashioned person, annoyed, slightly angry. Chatterbox, a person who likes to chatter or be talkative, jotted, write something quickly. She tells how she had a great relationship with all the teachers except the maths professor, who was constantly irritated by the Anne's talkativeness. Despite several warnings, Anne did not stop talking in her class, which prompted him to give her extra homework as punishment. The first one was to write an essay on Chatterbox, which she thought was a weird topic to write on because what could one write about that? That evening, after I'd finished the rest of my homework, the note about the essay caught my eye. I began thinking about the subject while chewing the tip of my fountain pen. Anyone could ramble on and leave big spaces between the words, but the trick was to come up with convincing arguments to prove the necessity of talking. I thought, and suddenly I had an idea. I wrote the 3 pages Mr. Keesing had assigned me and was satisfied. I argued that talking is a student's trait and that I would do my best to keep it under control, but that I would never be able to cure myself of the habit, since my mother talked as much as I did, if not more, and that there's not much you can do about inherited traits. Ramble, to talk, or to write at length in a confused or inconsequential way, convincing, capable of causing someone to believe that something is true or real, inherited, derived genetically from one's parents or ancestors. Trait is a quality. Anne came across the note she made as a reminder for the essay, and she began thinking about the topic. While anyone could mention random stuff written for the sake of filling pages, she wanted to present concrete arguments in support of talking. She mentioned that she will try to better herself as a student, but talking is something that cannot be eliminated completely. This is because she got it as an inherited trait from her mother, and this is how she ended up writing 3 pages on the topic. Mr. Keesing had a good laugh at my arguments, but when I proceeded to talk my way through the next 2 lessons, he assigned me a second essay. This time it was supposed to be on an incorrigible chatterbox. I handed it in, and Mr. Keesing had nothing to complain about for 2 whole lessons. However, during the 3rd lesson, he'd finally had enough, and Frank, as punishment for talking in class, write an essay entitled Quack, 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 said Mistress Chatterbox. Proceeded means to begin a course of action. Incorrigible, not able to be changed. Mistress, a woman in a position of authority or control. The professor found Anne's arguments to be amusing, but when she did not stop talking in the next lesson also, he gave her yet another assignment or punishment. The topic was incorrigible chatterbox. Incorrigible refers to a bad habit that is difficult to change. And also she submitted the topic. And on receiving the assignment, the professor did not say anything for her for a while. While when he lost his patience, he again handed her another assignment as punishment on the topic Quack, 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 said Mistress Chatterbox. The class roared. I had to laugh too, though I'd nearly exhausted my ingenuity on the topic of chatterboxes. It was time to come up with something else, something original. My friend San, who good at poetry, offered to help me write the essay from beginning to end in verse, and I jumped for joy. Mr. Keesing was trying to play a joke on me with this ridiculous subject, but I'd make sure the joke was on him. Roared, laughed here. Exhausted, completely used up. Ingenuity, the quality of being clever, original, and inventive. Verse, a writing arrangement with a metrical rhythm, typically having a rhyme. ridiculous, deserving, or inviting derision or mockery, absurd. When the professor scolded her for the third time and punished her, the whole class started laughing. As a result, she had to pretend to be amused too. After writing twice on similar topics, she ran out of thoughts. Thus, our friend San, who was good at poetry, offered to help her write the rhyme. The whole assignment scenario was to make Anne feel ashamed, but she made sure that she gave an effective reply. When the professor scolded her for the third time and punished her, the whole class started laughing. I finished my poem and it was beautiful. It was about a mother duck and a father swan with three baby ducklings who were bitten to death by the father because they quacked too much. Luckily, Mr. Keesing took the joke the right way. He read the poem to the class, adding his own comments, and to several other classes as well. Since then, I've been allowed to talk and haven't been assigned any extra homework. On the contrary, Mr. Keesing's always making jokes these days. Yours, Anne. Extracted from the Diary of a Young Girl with slight adaptation. Contrary, opposite in nature, direction, or meaning. So she finally wrote her third assignment in the form of a poem which turned out to be great. She wrote an entire satire that a father swan bit his three baby ducklings to death because of their noisy nature. To her good luck, the professor took it lightly. The professor recited the entire poem in front of the class while giving his own remarks simultaneously. The author became fortunate enough to talk uninterruptedly about this incident without any further homework or as punishment. Also, Mr. Keesing, the professor, started cracking jokes every now and then in front of the class. In this lesson, Anne talks about being lonely and having no one to talk to despite being surrounded by family and around 30 people whom she called her friends. Thus, she takes the decision of writing her feelings in a diary. It is unusual for her to write in a diary, but she is really in need of a true friend. Thus, she decides to name her diary Kitty, and unlike other people, she is not going to mention just facts in it. She describes her family and early childhood where they all migrated, her early schooling. After giving a brief account of her background, she comes to the present day where she tells us about the result day. Everyone in the class is nervous about their result, and boys are even making bets, and was quite sure about herself and her friends. She had a good equation with all the teachers except her maths professor, who was constantly annoyed at her for her talking habits. Thus, he started giving her punishments in the form of essays on real topics such as chatterbox, to which she replied with full wit. She wrote essays that were funny and explained that this was a trait that she had inherited from her mother and not much could be done about it. After that third and last assignment, Mr. Keesing never pointed her out or for talking. The end. Thank you.